Shavua Tov, we are nestled between the days of remembrance. Last week was Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and this coming week is Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, for the soldiers who perished and for the victims of terrorism. And of course, we're in the overall period of the counting of the Omer, where we recall the suffering and the tragedies of the Jewish communities of the Rhineland during the Crusades, where many Jews gave their lives in order to preserve their faith. This is why I'd like to discuss the commandment of sanctification of God's name. Even though it's in next week's Parsha, where it says, "Thou shalt not profane my holy name, I shall be sanctified amongst the Bnei Yisrael, v'nikdashti b'toch Bnei Yisrael," it's also relevant for this week's Parsha because this Parsha is called Kedoshim, which means holies. You shall become holy people, and that is very much related. Now, the extreme and famous example of the commandment to sanctify God's name is, of course, the requirement to give one's life for the sake of God under certain extreme circumstances. For example, if a non-Jew comes and requires a Jew to violate one of the three cardinal rules, either to worship idols or to commit murder or to commit adultery, then the Jew must give up their life rather than violate those three commandments. But the Rambam also says there's another instance as well. If there are 10 Jews present at the moment, and a non-Jew comes with an intention of forcing the Jew to violate his religion for the sake of violation of the religion, then all of the commandments become yehareg ve'al ya'avor. All of the commandments become a reason for the Jew to give up his life. So if a non-Jew comes and says, "I want to see you eat this non-kosher food," and he's doing it in order to demonstrate that Judaism is wrong. He wants to get rid of Judaism, and there are 10 Jews watching, so then the Jew has to say, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to eat the non-kosher food." If the non-Jew is doing it just for their own personal benefit, for example, it's the Sabbath, and the non-Jew comes and holds a gun and says, "I want you to drive me to Hotzenplatz." Now here the non-Jew is not coming to cause the Jew to reject his religion. He just wants to get a ride to Hotzenplatz. And if there are 10 Jews watching, is there also a requirement to give one's life? In that case, no, because by doing it, he's not repudiating his Judaism. He's not refuting his Judaism, as unfortunately some actors did recently, but rather he's just doing it to get a ride to Hotzenplatz. But this is the commandment to give one's life in order to preserve the faith. There's a joke, not very funny, about a man who is set upon by a non-Jew who holds a gun up and says, "Okay, worship idols." And the man realizes now's the time for the commandment, so he immediately says a blessing, and he says the Shema, and then the non-Jew doesn't shoot him. And the guy is going to the non-Jew, "No, no, no. I said the bracha, gotta do the mitzvah." So that's not a funny joke, I know, but that's that. Contrast with my high school principal who used to walk the halls of the school and say, "Pick up the Chilul Hashem, pick up the profaning of God's name that's on the floor." What does that exactly mean? He was referring to wrappers and litter and trash and messes that were on the floor. In other words, he was saying it's a profanation, it's a profaning of God's name to have litter on the floor. And it is a sanctification of God's name that the school should be beautiful and should be clean and should be neat. So therefore, that is also a fulfillment, it would seem, of the mitzvah of sanctifying God's name. So I'd like to say exactly what this commandment is and why this commandment affects all of us. None of us should ever be in such a situation where one would be asked to give one's life for the sake of the Torah. But even so, the fact that these things have happened has a direct obligatory relationship upon us. We will go into this in further detail, but I'll do it by telling a story of 2 remarkable sanctifications of God's name. The Vilna Gaon, when he was buried, was put next to a convert by the name of Avraham ben Avraham. Why did the Vilna Gaon desire to have that burial plot next to that very holy tzaddik? Well, the story goes as follows. There was a young man, his name was Valentin Pototsky. He was a student for the priesthood in the Catholic religion there in Vilna. He had a friend named Zaremba, and both of them were very sincere and very devout in their belief and in their faith. And they wanted to understand the Bible better, and they knew that the Bible was written in Hebrew. So perhaps the best person to teach them would be a rabbi. So they found a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Menachem Man. And Rabbi Man agreed to teach these two Catholic theology students the Bible in Hebrew. And he taught them the Bible, and he gave them midrashim and commentaries and lots of exhortation about improving one's character, improving one's faith. Apparently his lessons were so impressive that the two young men began to doubt their Catholic faith and became interested in converting to Judaism. Rabbi Man said to them, don't do it here in Poland, because in Poland there's a law on the books that a Catholic who converts to Judaism is liable to the death penalty. So better, said Rabbi Man, you should go to Amsterdam, a much more liberal city, and you can convert to Judaism there safely. And that's what they did. After the conversion, Valentin took on the name Avraham ben Avraham, and Zaremba took on the name Baruch ben Avraham. Zaremba then moved to the land of Israel, believe it or not, whereas Valentin, or Avraham ben Avraham, as he was now called, came back to Poland, to Vilna, and there he sought the advice of the great Vilna Gaon, who said to him, don't stay here in this city, it's dangerous. They know that a student for the priesthood has disappeared. Nobody knows what's happened to him. They think he was kidnapped or killed. If they find out that you converted to Judaism, you might get put to death. So don't stay here, it's dangerous. Go to a small town somewhere far away where they won't recognize you. And so that's what he did, but it didn't work. Somebody there, who apparently had a personal conflict with this Avraham ben Avraham, did recognize him, squealed on him, and Avraham ben Avraham was arrested and was sentenced to death. While he was in jail, he was very sad, and he sent a note to that effect to the Vilna Gaon, who responded, why are you sad? You're sad because you don't have parents now? You're sad because you didn't get married and don't have children? Don't be sad at all. God says in a verse which we say on the Rosh Hashanah service, that I am the first and I am the last. And the Medrash says, what does it mean, I am the first and I am the last? The Medrash says that God is saying, I have no father and I have no son. And so therefore you shall not be sad, because you don't have a father either, God will be your father. You don't have a son, God is better than even 10 sons. And this encouragement from the Vilna Gaon cheered up the spirits of Avraham ben Avraham, and as he was taken out to be executed, he was singing with joy about the mitzvah that he was being able to fulfill. And that is why the Vilna Gaon wished to be buried next to him. So obviously, Avraham ben Avraham is someone who fulfilled sanctifying God's name in the extreme classic sense of giving one's life for the faith. But who else in this story sanctified God's name? I think the rabbi who taught them the Torah in Hebrew, Rabbi Menachem Man. He didn't have to teach Catholic theology students the Bible in Hebrew. He didn't have to inspire them. But he chose to do it because, you see, my teacher, Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik, very emphatically said that, yes, there is a mitzvah in extreme circumstances to give one's life in order to preserve the sanctity of God's name. But there is an ongoing permanent mitzvah to live one's life in sanctification of God's name, as the psalmist says, we recited in the Hallel, Lo amut ki echyev asaper maaseh Yah. I shall not die, I shall live, and I shall tell the deeds of God. To live for the sanctification of God's name is a constant and a permanent requirement. And this Rabbi Menachem Man exemplified it perfectly. Everything he did brought great glory to God by the Torah that he taught. And so too anybody who even lifts up the trash off of the floor in a yeshiva and makes the yeshiva look better. Anybody who is a religious person and behaves in a way that causes people to say, look at this person whose character was shaped by the Torah, what a beautiful life, what a beautiful way of being this is. That is a Kiddush Hashem. And so therefore, the extreme circumstances are certainly there, and sadly it's happened again and again, and all of the soldiers who gave their lives. We say in the tefillot for them that they gave their lives for Kedushat Hashem ha'am v'ha'aretz, for the sanctity of God, for the sanctity of the nation of Israel, and for the sanctity of the land. That is certainly Kiddush Hashem, and they are Kedoshim, they are holy ones, as are all of the martyrs and all of those that we remember on these days of remembrance. But there is an important lesson to be learned in addition. The Chatam Sofer has a very remarkable statement that we need to take to heart. He says that the verse in Parshat Emor, where we have the commandment to sanctify God's name, can also be read backwards. Because what it says is, V'lo techalalu et shem kodshi, do not profane my holy name, V'nigdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael, I will be sanctified in the midst of the Jewish people. Flip it around, says the Chatam Sofer, and read it as follows: I shall be sanctified in the midst of the nation of Israel, and do not profane my name. What does that mean? It means that if there has been sanctification of God's name, a miracle took place. Something happened which was remarkable and incredible. Iran shot ballistic missiles, and miraculously we were protected completely. If after that we just go back to the regular grind, we live as if nothing special happened, it doesn't affect us, that is profaning God's name. But rather, when there has been a martyrdom, when there has been a sanctification of God's name, that is obligating us to improve, obligating us to dedicate ourselves to living for the sanctification of God's name. So every place we go, every person we come into contact with, we should leave them with a great appreciation of how great God is and how beautiful His Torah is and how true His way of life is. And that is sanctifying God's name through living. This is the goal for all of us. May we succeed in this goal and bring only glory and honor to Am Yisrael and to Hashem Elokei Yisrael. Shavua Tov.